On today's episode, a 6-year-old Tesla wins Motor Trend's Ultimate Car of the Year, Arianespace experiences a launch failure, and Joe interviews Christian from Launch Pad Astronomy. Let's get ludicrous. Hello and welcome to Our Ludicrous Future. This is the podcast where we talk about all the crazy cool things that are happening today that are going to make our future super freaking awesome. And with us this week is Ben Sullins.
What's up, guys? It's Ben Sullins from Teslanomics, and also hosting is Tim Dodd.
Oh yeah, hey, it's me, Tim Dodd, the Everyday Astronaut. We are, however, missing a certain Joe this week. He is busy, but we're trying to do a new thing because we all kind of have pretty busy runaround lives. So if we're to be gone, we're trying to pre-produce some content. So Joe, actually, we have a really good interview this week with Christian from Launch Pad Astronomy, which is awesome. So we're going to be putting that in this episode. So I think that's a good idea, right?
Yeah, not bad. I mean, if you can interview someone or just even talk about something that's, that you're interested in or whatever, that way, still get that, but it's not you don't have to physically be here because, with all three of us, it's kind of hard sometimes.
It gets pretty hard sometimes, but I'm happy to be back home after almost 2 weeks in California, in your stupid state with all the sun and Disneylands and stuff.
But with the traffic, so when we hung out, we were down, I don't really consider Anaheim, LA. I guess you're like kind of getting there, but yesterday, actually, was it yesterday? Jeez, I don't know. 2 days ago, I was in... I went up to a WeWork space that has podcasting rooms. They have like this whole setup there. It's really awesome. It's in West Hollywood. I had completely forgot. like from San Diego to like Anaheim is maybe 2 hours. That's not a big deal. But then from Anaheim to say West Hollywood is like another 2 hours.
It literally is.
Yeah, it was like 3.5 hours there, 4.5 hours coming back. I'm like, yeah, this is why I don't do this.
Yeah.
So we have the sunshine, but we also have, a gazillion people. So
it's true, but
good or the bad.
If everyone just had, like self-driving cars, and autonomous cars, maybe it wouldn't be such a big deal. It's almost like there's a certain car company out there that is working on autonomous driving and has a car that's 6 years old that just won an award. What is anything about that?
What are you talking about?
Worst
Man, I couldn't
segue.
Imagine.
Literally, that was the dumbest segue ever.
It's all good. So that brings up this really cool story that I personally am very excited about because I happen to have owned a 2013 Tesla Model S.
Hey, did you sell yours?
I have a buyer now. He's coming out, so it'll be gone.
Sweet.
Very soon.
Congrats.
Yeah, thanks. It's one of those things where you have to find the right person because not a lot of people understand. There were a few people I talked to in trying to sell it that just were clueless about Teslas. They're like, okay, so is it gonna will it charge? Can it still charge? How do you think I drove it here?
Nope, it's on its last leg. This is the last charge, so you get about 200 miles from here till eternity. So be very careful. Choose very carefully.
Okay.
You might want to get a flatbed trailer.
Yeah, so it took a while to find someone that actually kind of knew about these cars and all that and understood. So anyways, but yeah, that's moving along. So now that car, the 2013 Tesla Model S, according to Motor Trend, and they've been doing this Car of the Year honors for, it says, since 1949, so 70 years. They just went recently and they voted on the ultimate car of the years, the ultimate car of the year over those entire 70 years. I don't know if they had anybody that's been working there that long. That would be pretty amazing. But just reading from their article here, the selection and judging criteria have changed. The trophies have changed. The vehicles have most certainly changed. But the spirit behind Car of the Year is the same today as it was in 1949. Identified the most superlative new vehicle introduced each year. We are confident were we to summon all the judges and staff of the past 70 years, 70 years, we would come to a rapid consensus. No vehicle we've awarded, be it Car of the Year, Import Car of the Year, SUV of the Year, or Truck of the Year, can equal the impact, performance, and engineering excellence that is our ultimate Car of the Year winner, the 2013 Tesla Model S. And they went on to say that the mere fact that the Tesla Model S exists at all is a testament to innovation and entrepreneurship, the very qualities that once made the American automobile industry the largest, richest, and most powerful in the world. And the last little bit there that I thought was interesting from that quip was it says, America can still make things. So that tugging at those little patriotic heartstrings I have going on. But man, I'm
pretty
kind of
amazing.
surprised. What do you think?
I mean, that's shocking. I first off, like, why now? Okay, obviously it won Car of the Year, I think, when it came out in 2013, right? And that's why it was in this category, right? So they chose their favorite Car of the Year, making it the ultimate car. Like you said before we aired it, it should have just been called Car of the Century.
Right, yeah, at this point.
Yeah. It still really surprised me because I didn't think they loved it that much. At the time, but maybe they're realizing the impact of it and seeing how much it's shifting the industry. That just actually does surprise me quite a bit. Yeah,
and I would imagine, I don't know if the Model 3 got Car of the Year, but I would imagine it probably wouldn't hold it because like the Model S, I think what it did is so when Tesla just made the Roadster, it was, oh, that's cute. That's like a really fun kind of little toy
gimmick
for rich people.
Yeah.
Yeah. And admittedly, that's what it was. It was like a proof of concept, basically, that they made a couple thousand of. But the Model S was, I think, what really scared the auto industry. In fact, I've talked to people that reviewed the 2012 Model S about this, and they said that all of the executives at all the other companies were shaking in their boots when this came out because, yeah, it was still super expensive, but it was feasible. It was an actual sedan that like changed the definition of luxury. The way I think of it, you can think of luxury when it comes to cars as like, ostrich skin seats or something wild, exotic like that, like fancy buttons and things like that. Or you can think of the advanced tech as a form of luxury as well. And I think, people, like if you come from, let's say a normal car, like Honda Civic, Toyota Camry or something, you go into a Tesla of any variety, you're like, oh my God, this thing is like wildly luxurious. But if you actually get in a really like high-end luxury car and you get to a Tesla, it definitely feels Spartan. It definitely feels like a downgrade in terms of the quality of the materials, but it's the tech that really changed that. And I think that, this car, it has forced the rest of the industry to like try to conform. And, and the Model 3, I don't know, again, I don't remember if it was Car of the Year or not, but I would argue it probably wouldn't have had that big of an impact because it's kind of like the mass market version of the Model S, right? Like it's still an amazing vehicle, but it probably, because the Model S already flipped that switch in the industry, probably wouldn't have had as well. If the Model S didn't exist, it would have. But since it did, it's an incremental step, not like a complete shift.
Yeah, yeah. And I think one of the big things that people need to remember is the luxury, I think, of what Tesla introduced in particular is the integration, the human experience, the integration into so many weird little experiences in owning an automobile, including things like, oh, it's going to update itself now. It's going to... someone thought it would be a good idea to give it some more cameras or give it like the ability to record off those cameras. All these, obviously the 2013 didn't have that ability, but the fact that the car was capable and the car was able to continually upgrade itself and get new firmware updates and stuff it's hard to...
It's wild.
It's hard to say how much of an impact and how different that was, especially back then. There just literally wasn't a car that was doing anything like that.
No, it completely changed the perception of what was possible. I've said it many times. It's funny because sometimes people put like my channel into this automotive category, but I really don't think of what I do in Teslanomics as automotive at all because I genuinely hate cars. Like I think they are in general way overpriced, way like boring and not exciting whatsoever. There are some that are pretty cool, but Tesla changed that. So I think like, the new generation growing up, when they get into a car, if they even, want to own a car one day, this is what they're going to want. It's not going to be that old looking BMW interior or any of these other kind of fancy things. Even as my wife pointed out in the video we did together about this, even to her, the Model S and Model X feel ornate and kind of gaudy or like gilded in some ways compared to the Model 3.
Same.
You know, so as the newer versions of Teslas come out that are even more advanced and more kind of sleek in their design, I think that's just what people are going to want. So if these other companies don't get on board, nobody's going to buy their cars. Literally nobody.
Right.
And the Model S was the catalyst for all that, you know?
Huge deal. I mean, not huge. I don't want to be hyperbole. You know, oh, Tesla's the best, and Motor Trend said it. But no, it is. It does just say like you'll say that, but it does just show that that in the industry, people are retrospectively now looking at that moment as a pretty big mic drop. And even though it was such a long, you know, people were just going, no way, this is not going to work. They won't be able to mass produce this. It had so many deterrents against it actually making it online, and here it is today. One of the, you know, a well received car, and you see them all over the place. Yeah,
and I think the Model 3 is probably also pushed it even further to where now the car companies are just, I don't know, like drowning basically. You know.
Yeah. So we'll see. So they, you know, you talked about how the Model S and X interior feels more gilded, and the 3 feels more spark. Are we going to get an update yet with the interior for the S and X, or what's the news with that? Do you like that one? Do you like that one?
Our good Twitter friend, Elon Musk, actually responded to someone asking about that recently, and basically shut it down. This guy, Brandon Havard, asked, when is the refresh Model X coming? Asking for a friend. And Elon shut it down. There is no refresh Model X or Model S coming. Only a series of minor ongoing changes. Most significant change in the past few years was to use high-efficiency Model 3 rear drive unit in the S and X front drive unit that went into production 3 months ago. So, wah.
But, okay, of course literally, of course he's going to say this. Mm-hmm. And the thing is, okay, here's how I see this. I think we're going to see a refreshed interior probably this year. And that, by his definition, would be like, oh, what? It's not a refreshed Model S or X. We literally just swapped out the steering wheel and changed the dashboard up. Mm-hmm. You know? And that would be the very Tesla way of doing it. And then 4 months later, once that gets a new set of buyers, they're like, we're waiting for some kind of interior refresh. Then they'll release a new set of batteries for it, you know? And all of a sudden it'll go over 600 kilometers or whatever, you know? And I think that's the way they're going to do it, which by those definitions are just minor refreshes, you know?
I think that sounds right. I mean, if you look at the interior of an S and X, you know, it's funny. I liken these things to phones a lot. Like if you take an older phone, you know, it has like these big fat bezels, this forehead and chin and all this stuff. And what we've been doing in the phone market is basically pushing the screen all the way out to where you get rid of all that. Well, if you look at the Model 3, it's kind of like that, right? It's the screen is like edge to edge. It's like, you know, very, very functional and nothing else going on. Whereas in the S and X, there's like these big fat like bezels around the screen, and there's all this extra stuff. Like there were definitely elements in the Model S and X interior that I think if you just simply kind of removed them and pulled the screen up, made it maybe a little bit bigger, that it would be, you know, almost like if you look at iPhones or most smartphones now, you know, Apple or whomever will say this is like a totally new thing. Every single time I'd always laugh that the guy was like, this was completely designed from the ground up. You're like, no, it's not, man. It's like you change where the charger is or something. It's like basically the same phone.
Or like this is the best iPhone we've ever made. It's like, I would hope that you didn't make a worse iPhone. What are you talking about? You don't have to say that. That's inherent to a new product.
Yeah, I recall seeing someone saying, doing a parody of that. He said, "This is the latest iPhone that we've made." Like,
yes,
okay,
that would
like,
be more accurate.
True, yeah. So I think like there's probably, you know, some truth in what you're saying that we may not see like, oh, it's a different car now, but we can see little variations. Like if you look at, say, a Honda Civic or, you know, these popular cars, you know, if you could go back maybe 5-10 years, the car is pretty similar to what it is today. You know, and every 3 or 4 years they have some styling changes, some kind of more major styling changes. So it's probably one of those things where, yeah, we'll see like maybe some of those bezels disappear. Maybe we'll get a new screen. Like if I don't know if people are listening that remember, but they actually upgraded the MCU not too long ago. So the newer ones like super responsive compared to the older ones, things like that, right? Where it's more behind the scenes changes than it is a full refresh. So I agree. Like we're definitely going to see some things, but probably not like a totally new car.
I would still consider, like at this point, and again, it's probably what you're used to. I already am so used to the interface with the wheels on the steering wheel. I think that's a nice, clean system, and it feels really good to operate. Where the S and X have kind of a different tactile system. I just think it feels a little clunkier, a little
buttons, baby. Give me the buttons.
Give me the buttons, says the guy with a 17-inch touchscreen in his car.
No, I do. Well, the thing on the 3 that's hard for me, and we've talked about it before, is I guess it's the same thing, right? Because I've had an S and X, and then I go into the 3, and I'm like, oh, these things are weird. Like, oh, I can't click them. Right. And it's not that they're not that they're bad. It's just I'm so used to the other ones.
Right. Yep.
That's all it is.
I would more heavily look into an S or X if it had an updated steering wheel and an updated like dashboard, especially without the vents. Like seeing manual vents in a car of that caliber now looks kind of silly almost. Yeah.
It is interesting. I think that they could do some cool stuff too with more controls there. Like that's the beauty of this whole thing is in as you touched on it was these things can change over time and get upgrades, Like I just went and charged my Model X the other day, and I was getting 135 kilowatts, I think, or 130. I posted on Instagram, so. But previously the max it could do was 120. And so that's not like an insignificant jump. That's like a good jump, and it was just a software update. Like it's just amazing. I mean, so it's not just fart mode that you get. You get like critical system updates.
Yeah.
And that's a 2016 car. So dude, I mean that is the thing. And so the vents are something. The more manual physical things you have in there, the harder it is to upgrade them.
Right.
So the more software controlled things is probably where I would imagine. Yeah. Like I would not be shocked if a minor upgrade is just a bar of vents that are software controlled, just like the 3.
Yeah, and a slightly physically different screen,
Yeah, right. Again, I think the layout, I think the screens, I think it's all great. Like I think it's all fine. Just maybe some of the decorative things they could make it more minimalist.
Yep. Agreed. Well, yeah, and then you had there was something else still about Teslas that about maximizing, not minimalizing, but maximalizing?
No.
Maxationalizing.
Increasing production. This was a pretty cool thing. So Jerome Guillen, hope I'm saying that right, is he was the guy at the truck event. If you guys are wondering who he is, you can go look back at the semi-truck unveiling. He was the guy that first spoke. So he is the president of operations, I think, or automotive president. There you go. So he's in charge of the automotive side of Tesla. He sent out an email, and in the email said that they're making preparations to raise output at Fremont. And one note of interesting thing he said was, while we can't be too specific in this email, I know you will be delighted with upcoming developments. And then he talked a little more about ramping up production. And please tell your friends and neighbors that we have lots of exciting new positions open, both at Fremont and Giga, which is kind of crazy because they had a layoff recently. You're like, okay. So more production, which is really interesting because they're at 1,000 a day now, so that's like 7,000 a week. And Elon, I think, said 10,000 a week would be the max a while ago originally, and I think most people were like, yeah, right. You can't even do 5,000 a week. Then they did 5,000. Now they did 7. So I don't know what this means. Is it they already have, I think, 3 shifts running, so you can't really add a new shift unless you've figured out a way to add more time to the day. There's maybe a new tent coming up. Yeah.
An
Mars
extra hour each day.
So I'm curious what it is. Maybe it's new equipment, something like that. Some upgrades to the equipment to make it more automated, something like that. I don't know, but it's interesting. Possibly a new tent. It sounds like that's where things have been going, really.
Yeah, I could see that being the option is, just spilling out into that parking lot even more.
Yeah, right.
I'm surprised they haven't built like a bigger, like a parking structure, like a 6-story tall parking structure for employees and just continued to take over the parking lot.
Yeah. Well, and I think they have buses, right, that take people to a nearby area for parking.
That's like all of San Francisco, I'm finding out. Like every company basically just runs their own chartered buses everywhere.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
It's exactly right. Yeah.
That's so weird.
It's funny, too, because I think there's funny stories of people that, like, they're a Facebook employee, but they got on the Google bus on accident because they just were, like, not paying attention.
Yeah.
Like, oh, crap, I'm at the wrong building. I'm at the wrong company. It is funny, though. Like, when I was at Facebook, we actually analyzed that stuff of how many people got on at what stop and all that to try to figure out sustainability in terms of, like, do we need to add more stops in a certain area or add more buses, or do we need to reduce some, or, kind of there's at Facebook like a whole team dedicated just to like sustainability of the bus routes that they had.
Gosh, that is crazy. Speaking of sustainability and bus routes,
I don't even know what you're going to talk about today. What are you talking about? Give me some space stuff.
A Vega rocket exploded.
What's
it didn't explode necessarily. So last night, just literally, when was this? It's basically sometime, there we go, at 10 o'clock, basically, Eastern time, there is a Vega. So Arianespace makes the Vega rocket. They make the Ariane 5. They launch out of French Guiana down in South America. And they were launching, I think this was their 15th Vega rocket. So it's a fairly new rocket. It's the newest rocket that they've made, actually. And had been completely successful so far. It had been 14 for 14. And unfortunately, they're flying a pair of Airbus-built surveillance satellites. That's where the bus comes in, if you're talking about, when I said it'll be a bus. Yes, Airbus-built surveillance satellites for the United Arab Emirates, so UAE. And right at second stage ignition, so this is the telemetry that I'm showing on screen. For those of you watching it, there's a green line going up, and that's your normal telemetry of where the rocket's supposed to go, and then there's the yellow line, which is its true trajectory of where it's actually heading. And all of a sudden, at some point, it just starts going down instead of going up or flattening out, I guess. And that's because at stage ignition, something happened. Either there's a chance, I don't think we have enough information at this point to tell if it was something like, maybe the two stages didn't separate or the second stage didn't ignite. But, the rocket ended up falling into the ocean. Whoops.
So it just fell? That's it? It just...
Yep. And I think there's still, last I heard, because I was reading about this last night, I don't know if they actually did a, purposely destroyed it or not. That's something I'm still trying to find, whether the range safety teams... Oh, here we go. Yeah, even this article says it was not, and this is from spaceflightnow.com, by the way. It was not immediately clear whether range safety teams on the ground activated the rocket's self-destruct system after the launch began to lose altitude. So, again, they have exclusion zones along the path of the vehicle for this reason, so that, if something goes wrong, no one is in danger along the path because there's no one in the path.
Right.
So yeah, they lost. And unfortunately, this is the second failure or partial failure, I guess. Well, this is a total failure, but let's see. It was last January 2018. There was an Ariane 5 failure where it went 20 degrees off inclination. And that means, like, say you're trying to launch on the equator. Yeah, 20 degrees is it was in the correct orbit. Like the orbital parameters were dead on, but it was 20 degrees off its inclination, and that is very substantial. So
maybe it needed to roll the other way.
Maybe it needed to roll? What?
to align the azimuth correctly.
Nice. By the way, speaking of, that video randomly didn't get demonetized. It full-blown got deleted yesterday.
What?
Have you ever had a video just...
Why do rockets roll?
Yes.
Video?
Have you ever had a video literally be deleted?
Like you log into YouTube and it's gone?
Log into YouTube and it says this video is no longer available, and it won't show you anything about it.
Wow, no.
Yeah, I immediately hit up my content manager.
That one time that I did the video of showing how to make dynamite with just home supplies, it didn't.
Well, that's what's crazy is like I hit up my partner manager at YouTube and I'm like, what happened? How can I avoid this from ever happening? And worst of all, I had a lot of external traffic because Kerbal Space Program, the actual like official Kerbal Space Program account, they had retweeted that video even. And then all of a sudden it got taken down during while people kind of peak traffic of people trying to watch it through their tweet. So I was like, are you serious?
That is so random, man.
Yeah, creator woes, I guess. But anyway, back to this launch. This was, not a good thing. The Vega rocket is a 4-stage rocket. It's 3 solids and then a liquid upper stage. Pretty small, pretty medium, medium lightweight class rocket. As a matter of fact, the payload was only 1,200 kilograms, so 2,600 pounds. It wasn't a very big set of satellites.
It's like my warm up.
Yeah, exactly. Same always. That's how much I warm up my body.
I could do 100 kilograms 12 times. Does that count?
That's good. I don't think I can push anything like that. So it's unfortunate, but hopefully they'll figure it out, I'm sure. And space is still hard. Space is still really hard. And that's the hard thing about space is that you only get one shot and everything has to go right. You can't have, the rest of the rocket could have been perfectly fine, but just because something happened at 2 minutes into flight, or, just after 2 minutes into flight, the whole entire thing was a failure. I wanted to talk, speaking of space being difficult, we had our Why Don't They Just for this week.
Why don't they just?
I'll make a freaking thing for it someday.
Please.
I know.
We need it.
This is from John Lennox at John Lennox 98 on Twitter. And by the way, we should say that we're going to start taking kind of priority to our new Discord members. So our Discord members will have access to an exclusive Why Don't They Just? And we'll be definitely checking that each week. And if there's a particularly good one, we'll start there and then go to Twitter. And also, I think we're also going to make it so, we haven't talked to Joe about this yet, but I think it's going to be our Ludicrous members in our Discord will have access to listening to us record this live. Just a little heads up, if you want to join in that, it can be fun. You might even have a chance to, add a correction in real time, because God knows we need that.
Yep.
But this is a good Why Don't They Just from John Lennox, and this could be a 2-hour-long debate right here.
Okay.
Why don't they just scrap the SLS, so the Space Launch System, that's NASA's upcoming rocket, and offer more contracts to SpaceX, Blue Origin, etc. for the missions SLS is meant to do? So, why don't they let SpaceX and Blue Origin bid for those missions that the SLS is going to do? Wouldn't this save a lot of money given how much has been wasted already? Do you have any thoughts on this? Is this...
So SLS is the really big rocket that NASA's been working on, right?
Correct.
Okay.
And it's basically using space shuttle technology. So it's literally kind of like using the external fuel tank, the big orange tank on a space shuttle.
Yeah.
Taking literally space shuttle engines that had flown to space. The space shuttle itself has those 3 engines on the orbiter.
Right.
Each SLS will have 4 because NASA had, I think, 16 engines left over from the space shuttle program. So they're sticking 4 of these on a big orange tank and then sticking those similar solid rocket boosters. They're a little bit taller. They're a little stretched and more powerful. Yeah. But sticking solid rocket boosters on the side and then putting something on top of that. So it's like a mega ultimate space shuttle, basically, minus the shuttle. And it's just the heart, it's just the go fast and high part that survived.
Well, how close are they to it going? I feel like this has been one of those perpetually delayed things, right?
You're right. It has been it was supposed to fly like 2015 or 16 even, and it just continually gets delayed. But they do now have, they're on track to maybe fly, they're actually making some legit progress now. As in, I think 2020 test flight, maybe 2021 test flight. Mm-hmm. So the hardware is pretty substantial and significant at this point.
And if we could snap our fingers and it was ready to go, would it have any significant advantages over any of the other stuff that is either available now or going to be available by the time it is scheduled?
If it were to fly, let's just say it flies and was ready for operation already by the end of next year. So say it does we're just going to make up a timeline. Say January 2020 it does a test flight. And then they go, cool, this looks good. We can start doing stuff in by the end of 2020. It has a capability that's substantial, over 2 or 3 times that. Like a Falcon Heavy, it'd be over 3 times as much because Falcon Heavy typically does something reuse. It's not going to do an expendable launch for the most part. If Falcon Heavy expended it, obviously still be cheaper than an SLS. But even so, it's just a little over half the amount of capability of SLS. So physically, it can launch a ton, a lot. And that's good when you have a payload that needs that. The problem is there actually aren't a lot of payloads that require anywhere near that capability.
Well, if we want to develop that solar array in space that Joe talked about, then we would need something like that. But yeah, there probably aren't too many applications, right? And then what about
Ship?
Yeah, that one.
Starship and New Glenn are literally the competitors,
right,
and competing in a more similar capability. New Glenn is closer to Falcon Heavy, but it has a huge payload fairing that Falcon Heavy does not have, so it can fly large payloads, like volume-wise.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a mix between a Falcon Heavy and an SLS almost, because it could fit substantial payloads. But Starship, if it was online and operational by the time SLS is, it would be a really hard sell to try to tell anyone that they had to use SLS over Starship. If Starship pans out to be as reusable as they hope and reliable and all that stuff, because it would have almost the same, very similar launch capabilities.
Right.
So,
yeah. And then I don't imagine the NASA one is going to be reusable at all.
That's correct. There is zero plans for reusability.
Yeah, I mean, so the tone of the question seems a little off to me because I wouldn't consider probably anything they've done as wasted effort. Certainly, even if you don't end up making the thing that you were studying or working on, you still learned a lot. And so I would argue that having a ton of NASA engineers work on something, even if it doesn't come to fruition, you still probably learned a whole heck of a lot, and those things can be applied. Those lessons can be applied elsewhere. So besides that, I think there is this in economics, the kind of sunk cost fallacy here, where people, you feel like, I've already spent so much money on this, I may as well see it through, kind of a thing. And I mean, what you're saying here, sounds like that it's a legitimate thing for whoever's in charge of NASA, whoever would make that decision, to think about. Of hey, I mean, let these guys, they're already doing the R&D, they're going to be spending all that money doing all that stuff. I don't know if it exists in the space community, but maybe they could open source this information, what they've learned about SLS, and say, hey, here's what we know.
It is,
hope that helps you guys, whatever, and let them take it from there, make these vehicles that will take up these massive payloads or whatever it needs to be. And in the meantime, launch, a ton of stuff with the existing stuff. I mean, I think it's probably a good conversation. If not, if they haven't had, probably something worthy of considering.
So, you're definitely touching on the right things. To answer the question specifically here for John, wouldn't it save a lot of money given how much has been wasted, stuff like that, for missions, replacing missions that were supposed to be. The problem is with that idea is that there's likely money allocated to the program. It's kind of like, school systems when they have a budget, and if they don't actually use all the money in that budget, and if the next year renews and they go, well, you had $1 million sitting around, we're just going to not give you that $1 million next year. It's not like that $1 million goes off to a private school, or whatever. It typically just gets, erased from the budget.
Right. So
if SLS is the same type of thing with NASA, it would not be anywhere near 1-to-1. It wouldn't be like we remove $1 billion a year from NASA, and now we're going to divvy up $500 million between a couple companies or whatever. Like that's just simply not how that works.
Yeah, the money wouldn't get redistributed.
It would not get redistributed. So yes, there would be potential for some payloads to fly on similar capable vehicles if that's an option. But the big reason that I'm realizing SLS exists and why it's still being pushed and still being pursued, and I actually am starting to believe it more and more, is it finally actually has a legit purpose. NASA's working on this Artemis program, which will be developing a, lunar gateway basically. And in order to get the Orion capsule is huge. I don't know if people understand how big Orion capsule is. That's NASA's spacecraft developed by Lockheed Martin. But Orion is really, really, really big and has a really, really, really big service module. And in order to get that really big service module and really big capsule out to do a rendezvous with, say, the Lunar Gateway, it requires something the size of SLS. You cannot do that mission on even a pair of Falcon Heavies. You almost could, but it's like literally
Starship or new something.
Glenn.
Yeah.
You maybe could, but the thing is this rocket is being developed for human spaceflight from day one. And so there's actual physical hardware considerations that go into that process. They won't have to certify this rocket for human spaceflight consideration because all the hardware is in line with that. As opposed to Starship and New Glenn will have to be certified and go through a process to do that. If they were to fly humans, which I just do not see that actually being anytime faster, anytime sooner. And if this administration actually genuinely wants to have humans on the moon by 2024 and have a gateway going up here in the early 2020s and have humans visiting that gateway, they're going to absolutely have to continue on with SLS, I think, at this point.
So so that's kind of the questioning I was getting at. Like, is there a use case here that is specific to SLS and there's no other option? And it sounds like there kind of is, right?
For this use case, yes. And a part of me wonders, because there's so much pressure politically to keep SLS alive and keep the Orion program going, did they develop a mission that currently could only be satisfied for SLS? Is that the case? And part of me cynically thinks that's a little bit the case, that we don't necessarily need a cislunar gateway. We could do a more traditional mission. But another part of me just says, you know what? I am ready for something beyond the International Space Station. I'm ready for human presence beyond low Earth orbit. Like Orion, I know there's a lot of hate being thrown around with Orion and with SLS, but Orion's already done the test flight. They just did their abort flight like last week, remember? I don't know if you remember that. It had the tower abort for Orion. Orion is like done. Orion is ready for humans, and it's further along in development than, say, Starliner and Dragon in some senses, in the fact that like Dragon and Starliner are supposed to be flying right now, basically.
Yeah.
Orion's at that same point, and Orion's deep space capable, totally certified to go out and return from the moon. These capsules, Orion has a heat shield capable of all that stuff, and that takes a different consideration than a capsule coming back from low Earth orbit. There's a lot of things that were built into Orion that physically are not there hardware-wise with Starship or Starliner, Boeing Starliner, and with Dragon 2, with Crew Dragon. So, in the case of if it keeps getting funded, and if there's a lot of pressure on Boeing to get the SLS out and actually fly it ASAP, and they're going to be doing a full integrated stand test here soon where they stick the whole entire stack up. I think they're doing that still, the hot fire test. I just had a friend, someone at my meetup last week telling me that they're working on that, and dang it, I don't remember if they said whether or not they are doing I think they are doing a hold down test. So 8.5 minutes basically with 4 engines on the ground firing at Stennis, which will be awesome. I will definitely go to that. And if that happens, and if they then integrate the rocket and get it ready to go, they have the launch platform ready. They have like so many things ready that it would kind of be a shame at this point, if I'm a bit of a sunk cost fallacy at this point. But if at this, we're $26 billion into this program or something like that between SLS and Orion.
I think at this point, if you don't see an end in sight, then it makes sense to cut your losses. But if you're like, oh, okay, like this is going to work and we will get it done, You know, I think that's where, to me, the decision point is. It's like, just because you maybe have a better alternative now doesn't mean you should, you know, cut your losses and stop progressing on it if you still have a path forward. If you hit a point where you're like, I don't know where this is going to go, and there's so many unknowns, like that's still really uncertain if we can even do it, then I would say, yeah, okay, especially because it's a government thing, right? If you're a company, that's what being somebody betting on innovation is saying, hey, we're going to figure it out, right? A lot of the stuff SpaceX has done was like, we don't know if we can do this, but we're going to try and we're going to make it work. But as a government agency, I would say it's much harder if you don't have a clear path forward. But if they do, and it sounds like they're making progress and they've got you know, all the right people and stuff like that, yeah, I don't see a problem at all continuing.
Yeah, I think that's. I'll put it this way: 2 years ago, I was team scrap SLS. Like, it's done. It's too late. It's way over budget, and there's been a lot of pressure now with Boeing and with NASA to actually get it done. And I mean, we're actually so close. There's enough hardware. I mean, everything's like literally ready to go. So at this point, if it doesn't fly, it is literally wasted money. You know, it would be hardware rotting on the shelf. It wouldn't be development rotting on the shelf. It'd be actual hardware. And at this point, and if it actually can serve a handful of human spaceflight missions, because I think that would happen a lot. I'm sorry, I love space. I love Starship. I love SpaceX. I love. I think Blue Origin will probably be flying people relatively soon, suborbital first, and then, you know, eventually on New Glenn. But if you guys haven't learned anything from watching Crew Dragon and Boeing's progress, human spaceflight this day and age is extremely hard with how rigorous we're testing things. You know, we are taking.
Isn't that amazing? It's like, I just finally watched the Apollo 11 stuff. I was just like, how the hell did they do this back in the... I'm just looking at the banks of computers and the whole thing. Like, yeah, my phone has more power than this whole thing. Like,
yeah,
it's crazy.
And they just had different assessments of risk back then. They were willing to accept 50-50 chance of you surviving.
Yeah, like, wasn't that... was it John Glenn or somebody? Is it like they're up there and they're like, oh, we're not sure. He's like, well, let's light this candle.
Yeah, yep, exactly. You know, we just had a different risk assessment. Now it's something like, I think there's a statistical analysis of how much risk NASA is willing to take with human lives. And I think these days it's, oh God, I'm going to get misquoted on this. I mean, it's like 99 something, 99.3 or something.
Oh, that's how certain they have to be. It's going to work.
Like certain of human safety, like period. It's an actual statistical thing. And they literally approach every bit of hardware, every bit of the flight through a statistical analysis of if it's still within that regime. Like it's a different era we're living in. And because of that strictness, Orion's been through that program. SLS has been through that program, you know, and is developed inside that program where it's...
So like, yeah, Apollo 11 and those, I mean, there's like the fact that it actually worked out is just astounding. I mean, that's really, you were rolling the dice there and it couldn't have turned out better. You know,
the biggest roll of dice was Apollo 13. The fact that on the way to the moon, you're going to the moon because that's your trajectory. You aren't like, there's nothing you can do basically like turn around. Yeah. And halfway there, you lose like half of your spacecraft. Yeah. And they still made it home. That to me was like the ultimate wow, you know, ultimate roll of the dice. Yeah, that easily could have been a loss of mission. All it would have taken was, you know, if some of that shrapnel had gone through the pressure vessel into the, you know, and blown out the pressure and everyone suffocated, you know, that could have been just as likely of a possibility.
Man, you would love that Delta V book by Daniel Suarez.
You're right. I know.
Because half of the time I'm reading it going, whatever that means. Okay, cool. Like, you know.
I'll get it on. If it's on audiobook, I'll get it for my drive down to Texas.
Oh yeah. That was, you'll dig it.
That was my other tip for this show, is they shipped Raptor last night. Serial number 6 Raptor that was in McGregor. You know, they kept kind of blowing up Raptors. And serial number 6 made it down to Boca Chica last night, or is on its way right now or something.
Sweet. And it's just one actual engine, or are there multiple?
One engine.
Because on the Starship, there's going to be 6 now?
It has changed a bunch.
Yeah.
I think it's back to, I think it's 6, maybe 7. I don't remember now. Yeah, I think
So
it's
this
6.
is the design of it essentially, right? Like this was
Yeah.
the 7th model of it, or
6th model of it.
6th
Yep.
model of it. Yeah.
Yep. And it's getting closer and closer to like, but the important thing is this is the one that will create the actual hop. So I'm preparing cameras and stuff now because I'm going to go down and try to catch that hop still, which is currently scheduled for something like early next week, which means I'll have to leave on Sunday. Yeah.
Enjoy.
So wish me luck. I'll make sure and keep. The only reason I wouldn't be able to do something Thursday is if that's the current schedule of the hop. But even then, I could probably figure it out. So yeah. So wish me luck. And we also have something special this week. We have Joe interviewed Christian from Launch Pad Astronomy. So let's pass this on to Joe, and we'll be right back with you guys to wrap it up.
Well, hey guys, sorry I couldn't be there this week. I'm actually going to be at VidCon, hanging out with a bunch of 14-year-old girls. That came off weird. Anyway, to sort of make up for that, I am actually talking to somebody that has a really great YouTube channel about astronomy and space. It's called Launch Pad Astronomy. I'm here with Christian Reddy, and we're going to talk a little bit about probes, planetary probes, and that kind of thing. So, Christian, thanks for doing this.
Hey, thank you, Joe. Appreciate you having me.
So we were talking a little bit before this. You said you were an astronomer in a previous life. Could you kind of give a little background on that for the peeps?
Sure. Yeah, I guess I was an astronomer in 2 previous lives, and I'm an astronomer in a third in a present life. It's kind of weird, but my career in astronomy. I mean, I could tell the story about how I watched Carl Sagan's Cosmos, and I watched Star Trek reruns as a little kid and all that kind of stuff. Obviously, that did set me right on the proper path. But my first job in astronomy, my first professional job, came when I was 13 years old, and I rode my bicycle over to nearby Swarthmore College in Pennsylvania, outside of Philadelphia, where I grew up. And I knocked on the door and I said, "Hi, can you use any help around here?" And this guy, right out of Central Casting, I mean, he's German for one thing, German astronomer, says, "Well, come back tomorrow." And so I did, and he gave me a job, and I was working at the Sproul Observatory at Swarthmore College using a 24-inch refracting telescope, and we were measuring distances in nearby stars. We were taking something called the star's parallax. It's the old put your finger up and close one eye and open the other type of thing. Except you're doing that with the Earth on opposite sides of the sun over a year-long period. So we're catching these tiny parallaxes of these relatively nearby stars, and holy crap, I was doing astronomy. I was actually doing astrophysics, okay, but I was doing research at 13 years old. So that was a pretty cool gig. And, I decided I liked that better than working at KFC, and I ended up getting a degree in astrophysics at Villanova University. Also happened to be very close to where I grew up. And then my big gig after working, I moved down to Baltimore, where I worked on the Hubble Space Telescope at the Space Telescope Science Institute. So my job was a program coordinator, which meant that I was responsible for setting up the observations that were being carried out on board the Hubble telescope. That sounds a lot more glamorous than it was. I was not the guy that I will now point Hubble to look at the Eagle Nebula. That was not me.
So this is before Hubble went up?
No, this was after. So this was after it was up. But when it launched, as you probably know, it launched with this terrible flaw in the mirror, right? Yeah. And so I was hired at just before that first servicing mission. So I'm really dating myself here, but I was hired just for the first servicing mission, and basically it was sort of like, well, look, welcome to the Institute, and by the way, if this mission fails, goodbye from the Institute, sort of thing. That was kind of like the proposition we kind of were all in at that point.
Wow.
It's a better work, or we
make it work, or else.
Yeah, we may all be hitting the skids right after this. But
there was a lot of egg on NASA's face.
Oh, it's terrible.
Yeah, I remember it was like it was a punchline for a while there.
It really was. I mean, it was an embarrassment, to be really honest. I mean, it was really remarkable how much information could still be recovered even with the deformed mirror. You know, all the computer algorithms that were developed to restore information that was taken. But getting that first servicing mission done, getting the COSAR restorative optics and getting the wide field planetary camera 2 in there was critical. So after that went up, you know, it's one of those things where it's like, I remember where I was when I saw the first image. Walk on the hall, there was a guy, an astronomer there. His name was Chris. I'm like, hey Chris, how's it going? He says, look at this. And he shows me this handout, this photo, this printout of, and I see beautiful diffraction spikes everywhere. And I just could not believe how, and I knew it was going to be amazing. So, so I was not the guy pointing Hubble around, but I was one of the guys. Astronomers would propose to use Hubble for their science. They'd say, here are the targets we want to look at. This is what we want to do with the telescope. They pass through all the proposal review processes. They come to me. My role was what was called a program coordinator, which meant that I was responsible for, taking what they want to do and breaking it down in steps. And my instrument just happened to be the wide field planetary camera 2. So I joke that I, can say that, oh yeah, all those beautiful pictures from Hubble that came out in the 1990s. Yeah, I took those. Yeah.
Well, you had something to do with that, and that's a big deal.
I had something to do with that.
Can you imagine if you guys hadn't fixed Hubble, like what we would have lost out on? That's a horrifying thought.
It is scary. Yeah. I mean, actually, Joey, I think in all my years, this is the first time I've ever had to contemplate that really would have been really bad. I mean, that probably would have. Well, that probably would have been the end of space-based astronomy, because if you think about it, I mean, like, all this money was spent on HST, and if it didn't work, NASA's reputation was on the line. I know that the first servicing mission was considered do or die for NASA. Their reputation was probably as low as it ever had been. All we could really do during the servicing mission, literally at the Institute, at least all I could do and most of us could do, was just sit back and watch. And we literally watched. I mean, I literally stayed up all night watching the spacewalks. I'd stay up till 5 in the morning. I'd go to sleep for a couple hours. I'd go to work. I'd come home. I'd eat dinner. I'd go back to sleep. I'd wake up at midnight or so, watch the EVAs, and I just was like, just glued to it. But when things got turned around, things really took off. And so with the great success of Hubble, I decided to leave. We're
gonna go up from here.
Yeah, we're gonna go from here. And I ended up working on. I ended up heading down to the Goddard Space Flight Center outside of Maryland, and this is where basically they fly Hubble. Although I wasn't involved in Hubble mission operations, I did mission operations for other spacecraft that you may not have heard of, namely the Rossi X-ray Timing Explorer. So I was basically doing my job, with an X-ray satellite. And it was cool. We were chasing after the afterglows of gamma ray bursts and doing all that kind of stuff. So it was a lot of fun. It was great. It was gangbusters. I got to do a whole lot of new stuff. It wasn't nearly as mature as Hubble. That meant that I got to really get my hands on, and it was much less automated. And I was really loving that job. And then they had budget cutbacks, and I went into tech. And so because I wanted to develop World Wide Web pages, and
the World Wide Web.
Yeah, and hopefully that'll work out one day. But I ended up doing that for a number of years, and then I got invited to. Long story short, really short, I ended up getting this teaching job at Towson University, teaching astronomy part time, and I said, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life, because this is really what I've always wanted to do. So I always enjoyed communicating this stuff to the public, and so now I have a YouTube channel called Launch Pad Astronomy. So I'm hoping that is something that can help to support my teaching habit.
It all goes hand in hand. Yeah. Well, one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you, because like last week, one of the segments that I talked about on this podcast was about the Dragonfly mission to Titan, and what a big deal that was. And so I thought you would probably have a really interesting perspective on planetary probes and voyages and stuff like that. You know, you had a really great video on New Horizons. And so I kind of wanted to ask, what is your favorite space probe from the past, and which ones are you most looking forward to in the future?
Wow.
Put you on the spot.
No, it's okay. I mean, honestly, I think my favorite space mission is Voyager. That would have to be my hands-down favorite. And I think part of it is the nostalgia for me, because that is my childhood, watching the Voyager spacecraft fly past Jupiter, Saturn, and then for Voyager 2, Neptune, Uranus, and that was the first time we
really saw those planets up close.
It really is, and it's the only time we've ever seen this. Like Neptune, or Uranus and Neptune are the only those two flybys are it. Yeah, it's not that we haven't studied it since. It's crazy, What's that?
I was just thinking that it's amazing to think that we've only flown past those two planets once.
Yeah.
Ever.
Yeah, I know, it's a shame. But anyway, like I said, that's how I was growing up. I mean, Voyager began when I was in elementary school. Jupiter and Saturn were happening when I was in middle school, and then Uranus happened in high school, and Neptune happened in college. And
that's cool.
Yeah, and I remember like Neptune. PBS was broadcasting live telemetry from Voyager 2. They called it Neptune All Night, and I had to observe. I was observing that night, and we had this roll-off roof observatory. I had the roof off. Summer night, August of 1989. I had the telescope pointed at my target star. I'm taking data, and I had this television off in a corner with the brightness turned all the way down so it wouldn't contaminate my data, and I was just watching Neptune all night. So anyway, that is my favorite past mission, but it's actually not really all that a past mission, because it's still an active flying mission. Both spacecraft are operational. They're not fully operational, of course. They're running out of power. They're getting weaker and weaker, and they're going to have to make some more increasingly difficult decisions as to what instruments they turn off in order to the crucial science coming in. And the hard part is figuring out what is the crucial science, because they're all crucial, Anyway, I guess my favorite present day mission has to be the New Horizons spacecraft, because it in so many ways it's picking up where the Voyagers left off. Setting aside the whole whether or not Pluto is a planet debate, we now have our first true exploration of the Kuiper Belt, and this is just a whole new region of the solar system that, quite honestly, nobody really knew existed when the Voyager spacecraft were doing their thing. Like even after Voyager 2 flew past Neptune in 1989, the idea that there actually was a region beyond Neptune, a Kuiper Belt, was still unknown, and most people hadn't thought about that before. And then in 1992, the first Kuiper Belt object that was decidedly a Kuiper Belt object other than Pluto was discovered. And now it proved that, Pluto is a Kuiper Belt object too, and there's this other thing called QB1, and now we have this whole new region, so I'm completely fascinated with that. And
that's like primordial stuff from the beginning of the solar system that, you can't really find that anywhere else, right?
You're right, exactly. It's the closest analogs that we have, of course, are the asteroids, but the asteroids, both the near Earth and the main belt asteroids have all been through some kind of processing, right? Most of them collided with other stuff. They've been really, heated up by. Sorry about that. No one ever calls me on my phone, and yet somebody of course they call. Like, that phone hasn't rang in a month, and now somebody called. Well, anyway, what I was saying is that the asteroids, are the closest things we have, and they're processed. Well, you get out to the Kuiper Belt, and they're unprocessed.
Right.
They really have not been. You really don't have much in the way of Kuiper Belt collisions. They're just so far apart from one another that Kuiper Belt collisions are very few and far between. The closest thing that you have to anything that's, quote, processed are what are called scattered disk objects, and these are objects that came in a little too close to, let's say, Neptune. Neptune's almost always a culprit, and they got flung into these high inclination orbits. That may have, excited them a little bit, increased their temperatures a little bit, and done, quote, processing on them. But then you had the flyby of MU-69, aka Ultima Thule, on New Year's, and now you're looking at something called a cold classical Kuiper Belt object, just this binary body that never encountered Neptune or had any previous disturbance, and it's just left over from when the solar system formed 4.5 billion years ago. It's this fossil telling us, hey, this is what the early solar nebula was like. This is our ultimate TBT photo right here. This is us.
Yeah, no, I mean that's what we were before we became what we are. I mean that's crazy. So if there was one place in the solar system where you would want to send a probe, planetary, moons or otherwise, like where would that be? Maybe that we haven't been to yet, but you've always had questions to.
Oh, does it have to be just one? Okay. I tell you though, I know. Joe, you really hit me with the hard questions, dude.
Sorry.
But I'll say this: I would really love to see an examination of Enceladus. I mean, I think when the Cassini spacecraft, nobody, if you're not sure which one's Enceladus, if you've ever seen these images taken from the Cassini spacecraft of all Saturn's moons, there's this one moon that's just covered in pure white snow, and it's just bursting with these geysers out of the South Pole. These cryovolcanoes, literally cold volcanism. And nobody had expected that before. Nobody knew that was even a thing until Cassini discovered it. So it would be really cool that now that you have these very well-defined geysers, it would be great, I think, to send a spacecraft to fly through those geysers and see if there's anything that comes out that might be biological. I mean, I don't think anybody's expecting to catch an Enceladin fish in a net or something like that. But I mean, even if there's like microbes or bacteria. However, we're getting what may be the next best thing, or maybe even the very best thing, and that is the Europa Clipper mission, which is going to kind of do the same thing at Europa. At least it's going to be sampling the geysers of Europa. It's going to be flying through them. I
always get Europa and Enceladus mixed up in my head. Yeah. Do they both have underground oceans? Isn't that the idea?
Yeah, they do. Right. So they're both ice moons, and they all have internal heat. So, if you've got frozen ice at the top and you've got heat at the bottom, there's got to be liquid water in the middle. But the thing is that, we see more than just evidence, or we have more than just hypothetical evidence. We have the actual evidence, not the least of which is the fact that, you've got these huge cracks on Europa. So you've got Europa kind of, where ice is playing the role of continental crusts on Earth and water is playing the role of the mantle on Earth. So you have plate tectonics on Europa, but it's all just ice slabs flowing past and cracking each other. And then, of course, you've got the water itself coming out. So it's like, okay, we've got these ocean moons, these ocean worlds out there. And really strangely is the fact that Pluto is probably one of these ocean worlds as well. And you think, something that's so far away. I know we're just hopping around the solar system here, but you think of something that's so far out in left field, and it's so far away from the sun, and it's getting such little energy. Well, yeah, but guess what? These planets are hot when they form, and they hold on to some of that heat, and there's still enough heat there to keep liquid oceans, liquid.
Yeah,
it's amazing.
I love facts about other bodies in the solar system, because it just puts you into perspective of, we live our entire existence, civilization and everything right here on this planet, and we just kind of like assume that water is always wet, and methane is a gas, but then you find out on Titan there's lakes of liquid methane because it's that cold, and yet they have an air pressure that's closer to ours. And then you go to Venus, and in Venus, if you were to land on the surface, it's like being 1,000 miles under the ocean, and it's just mind blowing, and it puts you into context of just how, I know this is trite, but it's sort of precious Earth is and the conditions that we get to live on here. Of course, we're adapted for them, but it's just mind blowing. The variance of states out there, I guess, in the solar system.
How alien these worlds are, and yet these are the ones that are in our front yard. You know, they're
yeah, they're
right,
the closest ones.
Right,
our
these
neighbors.
are our it's like you know, moving into a neighborhood and discovering that all of your neighbors are like Wookiees and Sleestaks and, you know, things like that. It's like, wait a second, you know, what do you mean they're not like me? You know, and
I think my neighbor is a
yeah.
Sleestak, just so I can.
Oh, yeah, you go.
Just put that out there.
But yeah, you're right. I mean, we live in a solar system filled with these alien worlds, and of course, the big question is, well, you know, what would it take to have another Earth-like planet? It turns out it's probably a little less likely than we first thought. You know,
very rare.
Yeah. So yeah, there is of course the rare Earth hypothesis, and I think there's probably some real truth to that. You know, you know. So I think it is quite rare.
Well, cool. I think that gives people enough to think about for now. I always like to bring some existential dread to my conversations, but no, Christian, where can people find what you're doing?
Sure. Well, I do my thing on YouTube at Launch Pad Astronomy, and you know, I do love to talk about this stuff. Believe it or not, my research is actually in stars and not planets. So I actually talk about things other than just planets at Launch Pad Astronomy. But yeah, please feel free to check it out.
Yeah, it's a great channel. So anybody who likes the kind of stuff that we do here, you would like that too. So Christian, thanks a lot, man.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate it.
Right.
Well, thanks, Joe and Christian. We have one more news item this week that I wanted to bring up. And this is also because I actually got to visit Virgin Orbit just last week when I was out in Southern California. And they were preparing for their drop test, which is dropping their Launcher 1 from their 747. And we have footage of that. So if you're watching what looks like basically a missile falling off of a 747. And I know that doesn't look like that much, but let me tell you, now that I've seen this thing in real life and understand the scale of how big this is, that is substantial. That is substantial. A 747 is an awful reference for scale because it's so freaking big that you just don't appreciate how big this rocket actually is.
Yeah, it looks just like a missile. It looks like a big missile.
That rocket is huge. You can stand inside it when it's like laying down horizontally. And
they still charge $25 for an extra bag.
Wow.
No, okay, what was this? It was a drop test. So their, I guess I didn't even register. Like their system is they fly up in an unused Virgin airplane, and then or are people going to be on board?
I mean, there'll be some engineers on board, but not like passengers. It's not like they're going to be like transatlantic and like, oh, by the way, let's just go ahead and drop this missile off.
Yeah, on our way, you'll get to enjoy a little view
launch.
of
I would do that.
Hell yeah.
I would absolutely do that.
So then they fly up and drop the rocket, and then I assume just pretty quickly after it drops, it just takes off and then goes all the way out?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a two-stage rocket.
And we've talked about this before. People have tried this, or maybe done this before, right? Actually, was this like some of the first, even before Apollo, right?
Well, there was the X-15 program, which was a kind of parallel program with the Air Force and and NASA to put humans on suborbital hops. For instance, Neil Armstrong did that in the X-15, but there's only really been a couple things that have ever gone to orbit from the wing of an airplane like that. Pegasus program does it. I thought
we talked about it as not a great idea.
In general, it's really considered. Why bother with all this when you could just make a slightly bigger rocket? Is basically the consensus of the industry. But this is seeing it in real life. It is a really cool system, and they're talking about doing it in a really cool way. Which, hopefully they've ran. I mean, obviously they've ran the numbers. They're a private company. Like it's in their best interest to make sure this is financially valid, right? Yep. But the rocket itself has things that I didn't like. It's carbon fiber, the whole thing. Tanks and everything are carbon fiber. It's a really light. I mean, it's bigger than like the Electron rocket. So it's a big rocket. compared to what I thought. In my head, it was about the size of an Electron, but it's a lot bigger than an Electron.
And so this is for commercial stuff. This isn't for people.
Correct. Yep. This will be.
So there's Virgin Galactic and Virgin Orbit.
Correct. And Virgin Galactic is only suborbital. Virgin Orbit, as the name intends, is orbital. Yep. So this was just them making sure so that the plane will pitch up at like almost 45 degrees. It drops the rocket and immediately banks off. And this was just making sure that that pylon system works. And that the rocket, all the, its dummy weights and everything is totally loaded, just exactly like it will be. So that's a good sign that they're actually finally ready to load this baby up and put fuel on a real working rocket and try going to orbit, like really
Send it
soon.
out, yeah.
Which is great news. I'm always excited for that.
Do we have an actual launch date? Is it coming up soon?
They're targeting this year for sure, and actually, I think they're looking at the next 2 or 3 months or something like that. I think they're like next month, but you know how that goes. So add another month to that. so maybe August, September. Get ready to maybe see Virgin Orbit go to orbit.
And I would definitely join you on that flight. That'd be super cool just to be sitting there. Although you probably wouldn't see much, right? Because as soon as it drops, it just banks off. And you'd be like, wait, I can't see it.
They would need some bigger windows installed on the plane or something. But it's cool. It's really cool. And I can't wait for that to happen because I'm definitely going to do a video about air launch. We'll go into all the details. And we'll pose the question, like, is it worth it? At the end of the day.
Yeah, it's a great question.
Is it worth it? And that's for them to decide, and I'll be a little critical of it because it's generally not worth it for all the trouble, but we'll go into all the pros and cons and look at the actual math behind what advantages you get from that altitude and that velocity. So
cool.
Yeah.
So that you got that video. What other videos you got coming up?
Ooh, I am shooting today a video about the missing rung on the Apollo lunar landers. So
on the ladder.
On the ladder. Did I talk to you about that last week?
I feel like we've talked about it, and I was just thinking, come on, there's like 1/10 gravity or something. Just do a front flip into it. Like, what do you need a ladder for? Come on.
Yeah, we did talk about it a little bit.
You're trained astronauts.
I have the actual numbers. I finished the script, and the numbers, by the way, are there's normally. I'm going to go with inches because I don't remember what they are in centimeters. Although in the video there'll be centimeters with inches. Anyway, 9 inches between each rung, and then 30 inches from the last rung to the ground. So that's substantial.
Yeah.
They're missing 2 rungs from that ladder. Because if you divide out, there'd be 9, 9, 9. So 2 rungs. So, that's kind of substantial.
And I'd be curious to figure it out.
And of course, like I've been doing with my videos lately, I decided to go down the deepest rabbit holes of this. So I talk a lot about like the crazy landing gear and how that system worked and some of the design considerations that made it so they didn't think they needed those last 2 rungs. And I closed it off with a funny comparison to the Russian solution or the Soviet solution. So,
well, one of the things that just learning, because I guess, the whole moon landing thing until I watched that movie. Do you call it a movie, Apollo 11?
Yeah, documentary, yeah.
Yeah, it's like a documentary, but it doesn't have the narration stuff. It doesn't have.
Yeah, that's what I kind of like about it. It's just
I heard
live audio.
Yeah, I heard that guy talking about it, how he hates that, how he hates this back and forth between present day and back, like in the past, because he said it feels like you're in school watching a presentation.
Wait, when's it ever in present day?
Huh?
When's it ever go to present day?
No. He said he hates that style of documentaries where it'll be like, somebody's sitting there talking about something and then cut back to that footage from years ago and then come back to, so the bouncing from the present to
no, but
the past.
Did they do that in Apollo 11? I don't remember there being any like.
No, they didn't, and that's why they didn't, because he hates that.
Oh. I see where. Yeah, I don't know why I did not grasp. I'm like, but they didn't. You're like, I know.
No,
but
that's
they
exactly.
didn't
He
do
didn't
it.
do that.
I know they didn't do it.
So I guess it's a documentary. But the thing that was new information to me was all the maneuvers and stuff that they were doing on the way. Where like so there were, I don't know how many, if you'd call them stages, right? But the actual piece that the astronauts were in was 2 parts, right? The part that was going to land on the moon, and then the other part that they would kind of rendezvous with and head back home with. And I feel so bad for that guy, Mike
Collins.
Collins, yeah. I'm like, dude, like, how do you that just must be. But I mean, still great story, still all that. But outside of people like me and you, or people that are really into it, you know, just missing all that fan fame or whatever. Anyways, the maneuvers they had to do were like it separates and then has to like flip around and come back and attach. Now, granted, you're in space, so there's not like wind or something that's going to throw you off course. Right. But it just seems like I'm looking at it now, like I would love to be in the meeting when the engineers are proposing this. And they're like, wait a minute. So you want it to detach, flip around, and come back? Can't you just like design it so it doesn't have to do that? Like, there's probably some real conversations, their head scratchers as to like why.
The biggest reason is originally von Braun wanted it to be one, huge rocket and landing one huge lander on the moon. But the thing would have been so tall. It would have been like 4 stories tall landing on the moon and unstable. In order to have enough delta V to get off the moon and come back home, it takes that big of a lander. Right. And they basically realized that's just totally unfeasible. So we're going to split this up into a tiny, lightweight, purpose-built lander, and then still have like a re-entry vehicle, the command module. And the reason why they do that separation is because the pilots need to be, all the astronauts need to be on top of the rocket, so that if they need to abort, they can pull free. So you can't have it like pre-docked upside down or anything. Yeah, and you can't have like the lander on top of it during launch, for all those reasons. So the easiest thing to do and the lightest weight thing to do is just simply do a rendezvous in space.
Flip it around, yeah. It was just, I was like, what is it? Like, really? Like, they thought that was like, hey, it worked out. But holy crap, like, I'd probably be sitting in there scratching my head for quite a while. Like, guys, there has to be something better here. Like if you miss that, that's it. Game over. They just float off, and there's nothing you can do.
No, because they're in the safest place they could be if they missed it.
They could just, fly back somehow?
They're in a free return trajectory. They're already going home, and they're in the vehicle that they can return home. And it'd be one thing if they had to get into the other vehicle to re-enter the atmosphere. Yeah, okay. But the vehicle they're in is where you want to be if something goes wrong.
Really, the question is which one had the bathroom? Because it's a long time to go.
They both had units. I think, actually, for sure the command module had a little tube and you poop in a bag, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, It's funny. I'm like, no mention of that in this movie.
You're such a adolescent.
Yep.
So, what are you working on besides watching Apollo 11? Which I'm glad you did finally.
Yeah, no, I love that stuff.
You should rewatch Apollo 13 now that you watched that, just so you have. It's still a really good movie.
The one with Tom Hanks, or okay,
yep.
I'll do that. So what I have going on right now, so I already have a few videos shot, ready to go. I just interviewed my buddy, as I mentioned, up in LA about some investment stuff. So I get a lot of questions about investing in Tesla and all this, like should you not, why I don't. And so that's kind of what I'm working on now, is my whole thesis on investing and all that kind of thing. So talking a lot about that.
And your most recent video got retweeted by Elon.
Yeah.
Congrats.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, that's cool. I mean, it was...
Did it help?
Yeah. No, it certainly, it bumped up the views a little bit. But the cool thing, so the video, if you guys are unfamiliar, is called Is Autopilot Safe? And I show some examples, and then Tesla gives us data on autopilot crashes. But the challenge with that data is that it's not apples to apples, right? Like there's really not a way, unless we had much more granular data, to show if autopilot is actually safer than a human driver, unless you had exactly, hey, people driving an autopilot on this stretch of road versus people not on autopilot in this stretch of road
with the same exact external conditions. Like, it's just not going to happen.
Exactly. Yeah. There's so it's basically impossible to get down to that granular level of data you need. But the consensus, the way I left the video is like it's all positive signs. There's lots of videos here. There's lots of examples online. There's lots of stuff. If you've driven in it, you have a personal experience. But the fact that Elon retweeted it to me was kind of nice, because like the video wasn't just overly, oh my God, yes, you're stupid if you don't think this is the most safest thing. And a lot of times when I see Tesla and Elon retweet things or send things out, it does often come from a super hardcore bias perspective. And I feel like the video overall was positive on autopilot, but it wasn't a like blindly, 100% go do it,
Right.
So
a blindly loyal foregone conclusion.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, my feeling from personal experience is that yes, it absolutely is, but the data is hard to nail down, but does have a lot of positive signs. So you kind of look at that and go, I think so.
Cool.
Go try it. So,
yeah, and it's just getting better.
Yeah, it's really interesting getting in different versions of it. So right now my Model X is in the shop for some other older parts. I'm getting some stuff done, and then I'm going to go get all my modifications and stuff. So that's kind of in process. And I got in a brand new Model S they gave me as a loaner. And I can tell, even compared to the Model 3, it feels very different in terms of...
Does it have hardware 3?
Oh, you know what? I'm not sure. I think
I've heard
VIN number will tell you.
You should look it up, because I've heard that hardware 3 actually is already seeing some pretty substantial differences.
I heard, yeah, the people hit me up. They said they got hardware 3 and they said it was terrible. And then like now maybe it's better. I don't know, but
I think it's learned really quickly.
Yeah,
someone just recently told me that they have hardware 3 and that it like, where lanes merge like this, and sometimes it does that splitting thing. It's already not doing that.
Yeah.
So
that would make sense, because really what should improve with hardware 3 and autopilot is the speed of decision making. Is really the only difference that should be between the 2.5 or whatever. Yeah. Version 1 is totally different. But by the way, quick tangent here. Version 1 autopilot, when they came out with it, they said it was you could not retrofit older cars with it. But looking at it now, you totally could. It's like basic. So version 1 autopilot, the hardware necessary versus the car that has nothing. You need the ultrasonic sensors, the parking sensors, essentially. Yeah. I've actually retrofitted my Model S with those, so that's super easy, not a big deal. You need radar, which again just fits behind the bumper. Couple pieces of hardware there, and you need one camera. That's it.
Oh, to go from non-auto? No, that's to go from non-autopilot to autopilot 1.
Correct. And when they came out with autopilot, the first version, Tesla stated that you could not retrofit the previous, non-autopilot cars with it. And the more I get into it, the more I learn. I think that was more of a marketing tactic than it was actual reality, because like I'm saying, the amount of hardware is not tremendous. It's like one camera, radar, and parking sensors.
What about like the wiring harness? Like wiring leading up to a camera up in the by your rear view mirror. Is that there with non-hardware?
I mean, you have plenty of room to put it there. You have all the same pillars and all the same space. You know what I mean?
So just run your own wires.
Yeah, it's not a big deal. Now Autopilot 2, where you have 8 cameras. Yeah, that's a bit of a different animal, right? Because those side pillars are. I mean, you could probably still do it, but
why at that point?
Yeah, to me that is like, okay, I understand, but literally you're adding like one camera, and all of a sudden
maybe a
you
radar.
got it. So I'm like, I think it was more of a marketing tag. I mean, maybe there's some truth in it, but I mean, it's like, hey, either buy a brand new $80,000 car, because that was the price of them at the time, or spend $5,000 on an upgrade. I think a lot of people would have spent $5,000 on an upgrade. So,
I wonder if we should make rich rebuilds try to retrofit Autopilot 1 onto a non-autopilot car. That'd be interesting.
I'm sure people have tried. I mean, my friends at EV West suggested it when I was over there. Like, they've done some wild stuff where they they take a 60 and they put a 90 battery pack in it. And then they add a dual motor, which it wasn't a dual motor before. They add the power lift gate, which there wasn't a power lift gate before. Like, those guys have really Frankenstein some amazing stuff together.
Whoa, that's nuts.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And in fact, if you, I mean, I wouldn't suggest this to anyone that's not like at their level of DIY-ness or whatever, but they've actually done some battery upgrades for Tesla owners from a 70 or above to a 90, and the actual cost is pretty minimal, because it's just the incremental cost in the battery pack and then labor. So if you think about it, if you take off a 70 or 75 and above whatever battery pack, what they'll do is they'll crack it open, and at that point the battery pack is done. It's never going to be in a car again, because once you open it, all the seals and everything are ruined. So forget that. But what they can do is take the actual modules, the battery modules, out and reuse those and sell those. So they use those in their conversions. They use those. People can buy them for home batteries. Like, though there's a big DIY community that's using these because they're super high quality, super good stuff, even though the car may be completely totaled. So that's like what they're doing a lot. So if you take out a 70 or 75 or whatever battery pack,
it's worth money.
Resell all of those modules, and then buy a 90 battery pack, which is sealed and still is in workable condition. It's just the incremental cost between the two. So they've done that for a few people, and I'm like, ooh,
huh. Interesting. Yeah, that's crazy.
Have a really cool DIY future in this space because it's just so fun. It's a whole new frontier.
It is. It is. Dang, we just had a long, weird outro, huh?
Oh man, I love it.
Tangent city outro.
Yeah.
Well, we should probably wrap up here. So, thanks guys for listening, and be sure and let us know. Remember, we do have that new Patreon and Discord, and and leave us a little review if you're so inclined, and tell a friend. I don't know.
And we'll see you in our
ludicrous future.
Hey, thanks so much for watching and or listening to Our Ludicrous Future. We really enjoy doing this, so if you like this show, we invite you to please go and give us a nice 5-star review on iTunes or your podcast listener thing of choice. And if you really love what we do have a Patreon set up now where you can go and donate whatever you can donate, and there's little perks that you can get from that, including getting your name in the credits, amongst other things. Access to us is pretty cool, so thanks again for listening, and support however you can, and we do appreciate it very much. Thanks.